I think people are really realizing that this is not what America is. This is even not what American conservatism is.
Now, at a climate summit in San Francisco earlier this week, former US Vice President Al Gore drew parallels between President Trump and Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler.
And I understand very well why it is wrong to compare Adolf Hitler's Third Reich to any other movement. It was uniquely evil, full stop. I get it. But there are important lessons from the history of that emergent evil, and here is one that I regard as essential. In the immediate aftermath of World War II, a small group of philosophers who had escaped Hitler's murderous regime returned to Germany and performed a kind of moral autopsy on the Third Reich. The most famous of the so-called Frankfurt School of philosophers was a man named Jürgen Habermas. He described how the Nazis, and I quote again, attacked the very heart of the distinction between true and false, end quote. The Trump administration is insisting on trying to create their own preferred version of reality. They say Ukraine attacked Russia instead of the other way around, and expect us to believe it. At home, they attack heroes who have defended our nation in war and against cyber attacks as traitors.
Thomas Webber is the Professor of History and International Affairs, as well as the founding director of the Centre of Global Security and Governance at the University of Aberdeen. He's written several books about Hitler and the Third Reich and joins us now. Professor, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
What did you make of what you heard there from Al Gore?
I think he ultimately gets things right. I'm not sure whether he, precisely because he's not just saying somehow Hitler is Trump or Trump is Hitler, or we're now seeing a replay of the Third Reich. He's focusing on how democracy dies. And I think there he is right, even though it's also worth pointing out that what he describes is generally what's happening when world wars of disinformation and demagoguery happen. Then there is this kind of move away from a distinction between truth and false. So this isn't just about the Third Reich. This is generally what happens in moments of this kind.
I mean, many people have been trying to draw those comparisons, whether it be as we heard there, the suppression of fact. It is true that President Trump has often, whether it's by accident or intentionally, we don't know, only he knows that, has claimed that it was Ukraine that started the war, whereas we know that it was the other way around. A lot of people today, there's an article in the Times of Donald Trump's first 100 days, again in there, evidence of suppressing judiciary, or not suppressing judiciary, I should rephrase that, but ignoring judge decisions. Are those comparisons accurate? Have they got anything to do with what was going on in the Third Reich?
Not so much in the Third Reich, because I think there people really don't understand what it was to be in the Third Reich when it had been established. So there, that really was a total death of democracy, which hasn't happened in the United States. But I think where the parallels lies is in how democracy is being eroded, how democracy is being destroyed, and how authoritarian populists, right-wing authoritarian populists, try to exploit this kind of situations. This is precisely also with what someone like Hitler or Goebbels were trying to do in 1932 and 1933. So there, I'm all with the similarities. Where I disagree is kind of at the core, because at the core, the ideology of Trump is the exact opposite, is the exact inversion of Hitler's ideology.
Do you, when you look at the second Trump administration, do you feel that, and of course, as you said, you know, America, of course, is a democracy and remains so, but do you share some of the concerns that people have voiced of the system being tested to its extreme, that system of checks and balances? The fact, for example, that we've seen most of the decisions that have been coming out of the US being directly taken by the president because he's managed to declare a state of emergency, therefore giving him that power of executive order rather than, for example, going through Congress. Does something like that, does it worry you when you witness something like that?
Yes, absolutely, very much so. I would also say, I think in a way, there is a danger here if we somehow say Trump isn't Hitler, to somehow say then things are not so bad. I mean, there deadly diseases come in many forms. And I'm deeply concerned about what's happening in the United States. And I'm deeply concerned in how Trump is really trying to see whether he can get rid of checks and balances through executive orders. And I was particularly about a month ago, I was very concerned about how a lot of people were responding to Trump, how there was not really, people were not really speaking up. I was also reminded to both what happened in 1933, but what happens every time regime change happened in history, that people kind of fall into line, maybe also out of a concern for their careers, the careers of their children, and so on. But I've actually just returned this morning from also from California, from Stanford, where I'm a visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution, and I'm far more hopeful than I was a month ago. I think people are really realizing that this is not what America is. This is even not what American conservatism is, and that people are really starting to find their voice again. So in that sense, I think there is, even though we see the same kind of dangers, I think that people are saying, well, checks and balances have got to remain in power. And also, I think with what we're now seeing is that the Supreme Court, including his own appointees, are turning against him.
Professor, do you also see that, of course, it's not just Donald Trump, but a lot of people have come under scrutiny. When I say people, a lot of leaders. This idea of the strong leader, the leader who would like to do away with the checks and balances because they are selling to their people that perhaps they know best, and also they can get things done, actually get things done, and not be dragged back by the system that's been put in place that prevents them from bringing their policies and ideas forward. Do you see that as a trend that's actually growing? Because Donald Trump is only a product of where a nation or a people is going.
Exactly. That's precisely where I see the danger. And it's a worldwide danger. It's a danger to a return of the time of kind of the great leaders, in a way, even a pre-modern time, really a time before the modern state existed, where people somehow thought that their supreme leaders, their kind of patrimonial leader who really sees the state as his territory, as his people, that you put all your hopes invest them into them, and that they then can take the decision. And I think there's also now this kind of, it's almost like a new world spirit, this kind of belief in the great leaders. And again, Trump is only a product of that. And that is why actually I'm deeply concerned. It's just a different danger than the danger posed by Hitler.
Professor, thanks for giving us your time. Professor Thomas Weber there, Professor of History and International Affairs, as well as founding director of the Centre of Global Security and Governance at the University of Aberdeen.